Hi, I'm David Steinberg, principal of Gaithersburg Middle School, and I'm glad to be talking with you today. This summer, we just finished really an important job, and that is planning the school year. And if you look behind me, you can see all these yellow pieces of paper and pieces of calendar above my head. And what we did is we tried to lay out the whole school year. And I'm really proud of my team for doing this, because it's a hard thing to do, to be sitting in a school in July. That's pretty much an empty school, because there's just some kids in summer school, but mainly it's empty. And you have to, even though it's summer, try to imagine the whole school year that's coming before you. You have to look at all the possible vacation days, and days to train people, and half days, and practice test days, and exams, and field trips, and see if you can get that all organized. And last year, we felt we didn't do as good a job about this as we should have. So that from month to month, we didn't have a strong game plan. So this year, we promised ourselves that we would be much more exacting. And we did it. We spent the whole week last week with about 15 people in this room, and we really got ourselves organized. The other thing we did is we laid out the management plan for the school, and that's where you think about your school data and which achievement areas you want to improve on and which you're doing fine on, and what are you going to do to improve in those other areas. So we laid that out as a rough draft also last week. It was a lot of work. It was at least 3-4 hours a day of meetings and writing, and then in the afternoon we were doing our other jobs. For example, we hired 2 teachers last week, and that's really exciting when you can recruit people who really want to come and work with you. But it's also stressful, because it means you have to do a lot of interviews, and you have to talk to a lot of people, and you have to get everybody's input so that when you make a decision, you hope you're making a good one. But the 2 teachers we hired last Friday, I'm really very confident in. In fact, one's visiting the school today. And that's the main job that we just completed. Summer school will be over in the next week or 2, and then August will be quiet for about 2 weeks. And then things start really heating up. The teachers start coming back and start working on their rooms, and everybody's excited, and everybody's thinking about getting ready. And then we just have 1,000 meetings with individual teachers who want to talk about what they want to do in the upcoming school year. And that's one of my favorite times, because everybody is feeling refreshed from having some summer vacation, and now they're excited to begin the school year. But that's a couple of weeks off from now, around the middle of August. That's the way it's going to be around here.
So how many teachers did you exactly hire?
So far we hired 2 this summer, and we've hired 2 last spring. So we have about 4 new teachers joining us, and we just finished an interview for an instructional assistant. So by the end of today, we'll also have hired an instructional assistant. And then we still have to hire 1 lunchroom assistant. So my guess is by the time the school year starts, we'll have hired 7 or 8 people. Most of the time people think that's no big deal, hiring someone. But in fact, every single person you hire, it takes several days of work to do that. You have to review their records and personnel, make phone calls, set up a panel interview, check their references, call their previous principal. Then you have to first make a decision. And then sometimes your initial decision doesn't work out, because after all schools are competing for the best candidates. So really, every job that we hire, you have to think about it taking 2 or 3 days worth of work.
So those first new teachers you're talking about, you said you hired, are they just teachers that assist the other teachers, or they're going to teach a class?
They're going to teach classes. One of them, for example, is here today just learning about middle school, because he's been an elementary school teacher most of his career. And he's going to teach 4 7th grade English classes and 1 8th grade World Studies class. The other new teacher we hired is going to teach reading in 6th grade. So she'll come in later this summer and work with Mrs. Patterson, the head of our English department, to get ready. Each new teacher you hire, you also have to do some training. They have to have their materials, they have to meet with the heads of their departments. And also, we know it's not easy to start a new job, so we also always assign somebody a mentor, because if they have somebody to go to ask questions to, I think it really helps them.
What was I gonna say? Okay, so is there gonna be like a new team this year? Like another team on the 6th grade, or like another team on the 8th grade?
We'll have 2 teams on 6th grade, 3 on 7th, and 2 on 8th. And the reason for that is our school just lost one of its feeder schools, Resnick Elementary. And that means
What do
we'll
you mean
have
by feeder school?
an elementary school that comes to our school is called a feeder school. And so Resnick Elementary is now going to go to a different middle school. And that means we'll have about 75 less kids than we did last year. So that means our 6th grade's a little smaller. So we can have 2 teams at 6th grade and have the right space for kids. But because there are still kids from Resnick Elementary who are here in our 7th and 8th grade, our 7th and 8th grade are still a little bit bigger. So we're going to have 3 teams on 7th grade because we voted to have smaller teams, because when you have smaller teams you can be a little more personal. So we're going to do that for 7th grade. But in 8th grade, we're going to have 1 regular sized team and 1 larger team, because we don't have enough staff to have 3 8th grade teams. And besides, in 8th grade, we're getting kids ready for high school. And so to have a bigger team in 8th grade isn't so bad. The kids are a little more mature and we figure they can handle it.
So, aside from school now,
Okay.
how is your summer so far?
So far, my summer's pretty good. I've gotten a chance to do some things that I really wanted to do. I had a chance to teach at 2 local colleges this summer, at Bowie State University and Johns Hopkins University, and both of them are located close to home, which I was glad about. But the reason I was excited to teach at these colleges is they asked me to teach in the graduate program to train future principals. Up till now, I've been teaching at Marymount University, and I have been teaching people how to become teachers, and I've loved that. But this was a chance to teach people who have already been teachers and who now want to become an administrator, and I wanted to try that.
What's the difference between the 2?
The classes that I just finished teaching were for people who were at a much more advanced level. They already had either a bachelor's or a master's degree in their own field. They had taught, some of them 5 years, some 10, some even longer than that. So they were experienced working in schools and experienced as teachers, but they weren't experienced as administrators. So at Johns Hopkins, I taught a class in how to organize schools. And at Bowie State, I taught a class in school curriculum and the underlying nature of why we teach what we teach. So this was really intellectually challenging for me too, and for the last 5 weeks, I've had to study a lot. And at first, it was difficult to study, so I could relate to what it was like being one of my students, because you know, when you first sit down, you don't always feel like studying. But I had to admit, after I got into it for a few days, I really enjoyed it, because the books were challenging, they were interesting, I had to prepare lectures and discussions and projects, and so it made me feel like a teacher again. So it was a good experience.
Do you still teach people that want to be teachers too?
I hope so. I haven't done it since last fall, but I'm hoping Marymount University will offer me a chance to do that next spring. This fall, I'll probably teach at Johns Hopkins and maybe at Bowie State too. And next spring, hopefully I'll teach a class on teaching again. I'd really like to do both, because being a part-time college professor is good for me. It means I have to think about teaching and instruction and organizing schools in a different way than my day-to-day work. It also means I have to read current research. And I think I'm not unusual. I think I sometimes get lazy and I don't read everything I should. But when I'm teaching a course, it requires me to read up-to-date information. So I think that's healthy too. And the other thing we've been doing this summer is it's our older son Daniel's bar mitzvah year, so that in August he'll have his special ceremony at synagogue, and our family is coming in from all different parts of the country, And so we'll have a special service at the synagogue and then a special dinner to honor him. And most of our summer is now taking up with planning for that big event.
So you really have a lot of things to worry about this summer, I would say, huh?
Yeah, it's not a down summer at all. It's a very active summer. But it's good because all the family's coming in. We wanted our house to look nice, so we've been cleaning our house and making it look good. And it'll be nice to see some of these relatives who we haven't seen in a long time. So that part will be fun. I also have found time this summer to exercise more, and it's because during the summer my hours here at Gaithersburg Middle School are very reasonable. You know, I can work a regular day, whereas during the school year I'm here approximately 11 hours a day, and that doesn't leave time to do much else. I've also just started a book that I'm really enjoying, and it's a book that is about Stephen Sondheim, the great musical composer and lyricist. He's somebody I've been interested in a long time, and I love his shows. So the chance to read something that's not related to a college course, that's not related to middle school, but that's completely something that I've just wanted to read for my own pleasure, I'm really enjoying that too.
It's a biography?
Yeah, it's a biography.
I'm reading a biography on Christopher Reeve.
He's a fascinating person.
Yeah. I don't think it's required as one of the books to read for school, but I just like reading it, so I'm planning on reading that, probably finishing it by this week.
There's a great pleasure, I find, in going to the library, going to a bookstore, and picking out something just that you want to read, and making that choice, and then putting aside several hours just to focus on something that your own personal interest is about, as opposed to something you're required to do. So I look forward to that. So sometimes I go out and I buy a book as a special treat to myself, and I put aside the time to read it. Just last night, my younger son asked me if I like to read. And I said yes. And then he looked at that biography and he said, "Is that a book that you're reading for one of your college classes?" I said, "No, I just really want to read this." And he was a little bit surprised, but then he said he wishes he had time to just read something he felt like reading, because right
and
now
not being like forced to read.
Exactly, because he's enjoying the book he's reading. He's reading The Rats of Nim, or The Secret of Nim, which is a great book, but it's one of the books he's required to read because he's going into 6th grade of middle school. And I think he likes it, but if he had his choice, I think he probably would have picked something else. But sometimes it's good to read things you're required to read because it enlarges you. Sometimes when I'm left to my own devices, I choose narrowly. And when I'm required to read something, it broadens my perspective.
How long does it roughly take you to read a book that you really, really want to read?
I'm not a fast reader. I think I'm a pretty slow reader. So this book that I'm really enjoying now, I think it's around 300 pages. My guess is it'll take me 2 weeks, reading about a half an hour or an hour every night before falling asleep. It'll probably take me about 2 weeks.
2 weeks. What do you say to kids? Do you give kids like book recommendations sometimes too?
Sometimes. Some of the teachers here ask me to come in and do book talks and talk about a book that I've enjoyed reading and explain it and take questions about it. So I do that sometimes. My favorite book to recommend is the complete stories of Sherlock Holmes.
I can never understand those books.
No, when I was about 15, that was my all-time favorite book. I read every Sherlock Holmes story. He was my hero, and I really got into it. And I know some of the language is not so completely accessible because it was, it was written around the 1880s, 1890s. But I thought the character of Sherlock Holmes was fascinating. And so I recommend that because it takes you to a completely different world. I've always loved mystery stories. I've always loved good puzzles, but I also like the characters of mystery stories a lot. And so I probably read one mystery story every month or two just for the fun of it. But I also really like biographies and autobiographies. And just this last year,
Yeah,
I've
I
read a
really
couple of
like-
autobiographies.
Yeah, I really like autobiographies. I like in 6th grade, I had to do, well, I didn't have to do, I chose to do a report on Charlie Chaplin. And I just thought, okay, this is just another report. I just do it and get it over with. Whatever comes out, it's okay. So I just read it, and then I really started liking it. So then I did more and more research, and then now I know a lot about Charlie Chaplin. I know when he was born. Now I know a lot of stuff about him, so it could help me in the future, like in film class in high school. You have to do something on him or something. I know a lot about him, so it can help me a lot.
I read his autobiography years ago, and I thought it really was fascinating. And then there was a film made about him.
Yeah, Richard Attenborough.
Yeah, I thought that was a really interesting movie too. Yeah, I think he's a fascinating character, and I think it's interesting that he could start out being a vaudevillian and turn into a great filmmaker.
He was so important that when he died, his body was kidnapped and asked for ransom.
Really? I didn't remember that part. Yeah, I liked him a lot. And I find some of his later movies just really very, very touching.
Yeah.
Like, what is it called?
The Kid.
Lamplight?
Oh.
Gaslight? No, not Gaslight. Oh gosh.
Modern. No.
Modern Times is very
Yeah,
funny.
That's funny. City Lights.
City Lights, yes. Is that the one? I thought that was great.
I think one of his most not really funny, but dark funny is The Kid. Have you seen The Kid?
Yeah. Yeah, I like that one too. I like when he mixes comedy with pathos, so that it's not...
That's why he was accused for communism, because they always
Really?
thought, yeah, he was accused for communism and exiled from the country for a couple of years. And the only time he came back was when they honored him at the Oscars in 1975, I think.
Yeah, it was a long time in coming. Well, the whole McCarthy era in the 1950s was really a disastrous time for our country. And a lot of people in Hollywood suffered because of trying to do what their conscience dictated. It was really terribly unfair. And a lot of people were blacklisted, not allowed to work. There was a great movie about the blacklisting era called The Front.
The Woody Allen movie. My dad has it.
Where Woody Allen was in it as an actor.
Yeah, but he didn't direct it.
Right, but it was a great movie, I thought.
One of the first people who I think broke the blacklist what I think and my dad thinks, Kirk Douglas. He broke it because one of the original writers of Spartacus, the movie that he was in, had wrote the script, Donald Trumbull, but he had wrote it under a different name. And then he says, don't let this happen to you. So he dared it and put it in as his regular name. And they didn't do anything about it. So from there, the blacklist slowly, vanished until later on it disappeared.
That was really a brave thing to do at that time. Yeah, that was very gutsy.
And that movie, not directly relating to the McCarthyism, but is in a way like the McCarthyism. The Crucible is very good.
Oh, The Crucible's a great story, and that's really, an allegory about McCarthyism. That's exactly right. The bad feelings that held over from that time lasted for years and years. In the biography I'm reading now, they talk about the great choreographer, director Jerome Robbins. And Jerome Robbins was a friendly witness to the House Un-American Activities Committee.
What does a friendly witness mean?
Somebody who agreed to talk with them. He didn't take the Fifth Amendment. And because of that, people who were blacklisted in the 50s sometimes didn't want to work with him later on because they saw him as somebody who had not kept faith with the artistic community. And here he is, one of the greatest choreographers and directors ever in the American theater. And many people hated him. There was a great scene where the actor Zero Mostel, who was blacklisted in the 50s himself, was in a show. A funny thing happened on the way to the Forum, and it was in tryouts here in Washington. And the show wasn't doing very well. And they called in Jerome Robbins as a play doctor, someone to come in and help them fix it. But they had to discuss with Zero Mostel and his, the other actor, Jack Guilford, whether they would be willing to work with Jerome Robbins, because they were still quite angry at him, because he named names.
Yeah.
In fact, he named Jack Guilford's wife as being a communist, and it cost her work. In the end, they decided they would work with him because he's so talented and they wanted his help, but the bad feelings didn't just go away like that.
So the guy's wife who they had to talk to got...
She
was
suffered
accused of
because of the
communism.
blacklist, that's right, because of something Jerome Robbins said. And there were film directors who also were friendly witnesses who gave names. And after the period of McCarthyism was over, they had trouble getting jobs because their reputation was soiled because they weren't very brave. In fact, at this last Academy Awards, a famous director whose name...
Oh yeah, he named names.
He was honored
yeah.
because he's a very old man now, but there were many people in the audience who were still angry at him because he named names.
They were going to give it originally to Kubrick, Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah.
But he had died, and they don't want to. They just thought maybe they can give it to someone else, but then they found out he was one of the people who named names, so there's big controversy over that.
Yeah, I've forgotten his name now, but he was a great director, but the bad feelings still live on.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think it's true that if you do something that breaches faith with your friends, and that's, you could really think of as not being very ethical, you could pay for that for years and years later.
And that's just like in the front, but he didn't name names in the end, Woody Allen.
Yeah, and you like to think that we'd all be courageous if faced with that kind of challenge, but I'm not so sure we all would be. It's one thing to say we would be, but it's quite another thing to risk losing your livelihood.
Yeah. And just in a few names.
It's true. It's true. I mean, I feel lucky that I've never had to face that kind of ethical dilemma, but you hope that you have it in you to do the right thing, regardless of the consequences.
Okay. Another subject I have.
Okay.
Today's the first day that I didn't have camp because I only signed up for like 2 sessions. Now I'm trying to get out and go to the movies because my dad wants me to like see more classic movies. I don't know, like for instance, like On the Waterfront or something. He's trying to get me more educated on film.
Good.
And I'm really trying to see more movies now that I have time. And have you seen any new movies this summer?
The only new movie I saw was Big Daddy. We saw it 2 nights ago because my sons really wanted to see it. And I have to admit, it was very funny. You know, a little crude, a little inappropriate, but I do think that it was still funny.
My dad says, even if you gave me $100, I won't go see it.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't think it's brilliant movie making, but I think it's funny. I haven't seen anything recent, and I feel badly about that because I used to see every movie. When I lived downtown in DuPont Circle in Washington, I could walk to a dozen movie theaters, and my wife and I used to go see everything that came out. We used to see everything that came in the theater and everything that came in the movies, and we used to see a lot of the art gallery shows because everything was within walking distance. And because we didn't have that many other obligations, because this was before we had children. You know, a great place to see on classic movies is AFI. Have you been there?
Yeah, well, I've heard of it, but I really haven't been there.
This is great. If you could ask your dad to take you
My
sometime.
dad's been there before.
I think you and your dad would love this. Also, the way they've created the theater, the screen, and the way they've slanted the seats, you really get an immediate impact.
It's like stadium style.
It's stadium style. Before all these stadium theaters opened around here, it was the first stadium style theater that I'd ever been to. And the screen is nice and large. And when they show an old black and white classic movie there, you really feel like you're seeing it the way you were meant to see it, not on some small screen. And they show it with very high quality. Sometimes they show the silent movies and they have somebody play the piano or the organ.
Yeah.
And so that's neat too.
Like in the 1920s and 30s.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. And I really do enjoy watching the classic movies. But I haven't watched movies for a long time. I'm hoping that now that I'm not teaching at night, I'll see some more movies and I'll go to some more plays. We just saw the musical Titanic last week.
Oh, I've heard a lot of good stuff about that.
I liked it, but I have to say I didn't love it, but I liked it. But I think that they staged it differently in New York. And I think this was the stage version that didn't have quite as many special effects. But I didn't think the music was as great as I had hoped it would be. I did see the musical Ragtime this past year, and I thought that was one of the best musicals I'd ever seen. I thought that was incredible. But I haven't hardly been to any movies lately, but probably in the next 6 weeks I'll go to see some.
Just last night, have you heard of that new movie that just is coming out in a couple of weeks? It's like the Blair Witch Project.
I heard that that's fascinating.
Yeah, me and my dad were gonna go. We went to Outer Circle, Tentley. It was Outer Circle.
Yep, I know where that is.
And we went there and we just saw like a huge line. So we thought it was just like the theater's about to open up. Like, okay, let's go get our tickets. So we parked somewhere and then we went to walk down. And then this guy's like, "Are you guys gonna go see the Blair Witch Project?" We're like, "Yeah." He's like, "You shouldn't go." He's like, "Why?" All those people in line are waiting to buy tickets for next week.
For next week, wow.
They've been sold out for the last 2 weeks.
I hear it's brilliant, that it's supposed to be very scary, but I think that it's the fact that it looks like an amateur movie
It's an independent film.
makes it even more scary, because it makes it seem real. I think that's really clever.
See, yeah, because it's real footage that they found in the woods from, like, the theory of the 3 people who went into Black Hills to look at the Blair Witch, whatever, like, theory. But what's amazing is they found footage and they made it into a movie, which is really scary.
I know. I think it really sounds like a clever idea. But watching old classic movies like your dad is suggesting, I think is great too. I mean, if you watch movies like the Hitchcock movies,
I love Hitchcock movies.
or movies like Spartacus and Lawrence of Arabia, I mean, these are great movies that are unforgettable. Sometimes movies like that stay with you your whole life.
Yeah. My dad, I think Friday, 16th, he was, for the past, like, month before this came out, he's been like, I really have to see Eyes Wide Shut, because that's last Kubrick's film, and he really admires Kubrick for his filmmaking. And he said it was really good, but if Kubrick was alive, it probably would have been, like, a rated NC-17 movie, but he died, so they digitally, like cut out some parts, some really bad parts, and they made it rated R. But if Kubrick was still alive, it would have been rated X movie, he says.
That's what I think too, because Kubrick was famous for being uncompromising. This weekend I heard an interview with Frederick Raphael, who was the screenwriter for that movie. And he's a novelist and a screenwriter in his own right, and Kubrick hired him to do the screenwriting for this movie. And he's also written a biography of what it was like working with Kubrick. So they interviewed him on National Public Radio, and it was really fascinating because Kubrick was apparently a very eccentric character. who only made movies on his own terms and was very uncompromising. But Frederick Raphael said he was one of the most brilliant people he'd ever worked with, and so it was endlessly fascinating. If something wasn't right, Kubrick would do it over again, and he didn't care how much money it cost. He would rebuild entire sets. He would keep the crew all day waiting until the clouds were just right for the scene that he wanted to shoot. So you have to admire somebody who's that true to his art form, I think.
Yeah, my dad says in every single one of his movies there's one really, really deep scene, like that's very depressing, stays in your head. Very, like, descriptive scene, it's like stays in your head. But very conventional movies that he makes really conventional movies. The only really conventional movie he hasn't made was Spartacus, and that's why he thinks it's one of his worst movies. But my dad really likes that movie.
I liked it too. I thought that was great. I liked 2001. I liked Dr. Strangelove. I thought was an amazing movie.
I haven't seen that one.
That's a very weird movie. But very funny, but really very, very eccentric. And what was the movie? Oh, Clockwork Orange. That was an
my dad. It was banned in England.
Oh, a very violent movie, incredibly violent. But there are scenes from that I've never forgotten either.
My dad says there's always one scene in one of his movies that stays in your head. Always one scene that stays in your head. So.
It's true. I mean, there's music in A Clockwork Orange. He uses Beethoven as the score. And now, if you listen to Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, every time I listen to it, I see flickers of scenes from Clockwork Orange. It's changed the way I listen to that music.
Okay, I really don't have anything else to say. It's been a good half hour, 32 minutes. So, just any closing statements you want to say?
I would say that I hope that you really do send in the other movie you made to public television, because I think it is a really great movie. I think it shows a perspective on illness that I've never seen anybody capture before. And it's so thoughtful and so reflective that I think if more people saw it, they would understand how to help people through an illness better. Mm-hmm. Because you and your dad's attitude is so overwhelmingly positive.
I think you don't even think it's negative.
No, I watched it and I found it inspiring. So I hope you do something more with that film. And if you make a movie using some of the things you're shooting this summer, I hope you'll show it to me.
Sure. I mean, let's just hope that lady calls us back. So, it's been 3 days at least.
I hope so too.
So, thank you very much for your time this morning. It's almost afternoon, but